be to you, the reader.
Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
Wisdom, let us attend, let us hear the holy gospel. Peace be with all.
And with your spirit.
The holy gospel according to St. Matthew. Let us be attentive.
Glory to you, O Lord, glory to you.
At that time a man came up to Jesus and kneeling before him said, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is an epileptic and he suffers terribly. For often he falls into the fire and often into the water. And I brought him to your disciples and they could not heal him. And Jesus answered, O faithless and perverse generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him here to me. And Jesus rebuked him, and the demon came out of him, and the boy was cured instantly. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, Why could we not cast it out? And Jesus said to them, Because you have no faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith, even as a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, Move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible to you. But this kind never comes out except by prayer and fasting. As they were traveling together through Galilee, Jesus said to them, The Son of Man is to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And he will rise again on the third day.
Glory to you, O Lord, glory to you.
Please be seated. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Good morning. Good morning. See, the Christian life, so it's a very difficult thing to say and explain sometimes, but the Christian life isn't a matter of assembling the right propositions and putting them in order. The Christian life really has a dimension of warfare to it. Because the Christian life is really the life that brings us closer to Christ. Christ is the truth. So truth is apprehended and comprehended through experience. The fancy word for that is existentially. So in other words, we can read about the Christian life, we can read about Christ, and we must. It's very important, and it's important that we read the right things. But reading alone will not be sufficient. Now, it's necessary that we learn in order to inform ourselves, but there comes a time when we have to apply that which we have learned. It's the difference between reading about a car and getting in the car and driving it. You can know everything there is to know about a particular car, and it might be a beautiful car, and it might be the best designed and best built car in the whole world, but you really won't know what that car is and what it can do until you get behind the wheel and you drive it. It's two different kinds of experience. It's the same with the Christian life. It's important, you know, in order to get into the car, you got to know how to drive, right? You have to learn how to do that. That's why it's important to inform ourselves and to teach ourselves. But it has to be applied. Because if it's not applied, then we're not transformed. Then the movement closer to Christ can only go so far. Because the movement closer to Christ affects in us a corresponding change and transformation. And we've talked a lot about that before, but he came into the world to save sinners. But that salvation is a process, and that process is actualized in us through experience. It is. Orthodoxy especially is a very experiential faith. It is. And Christ has to be born in us, and that begins in baptism. But it's also something that has to be lived out in everyday life. It just has to. Otherwise, Christ remains an idea and a concept. But he's more than an idea and a concept. He's a real living being. He's God. And like every other real living being, the only way we get to know them and get closer to them is when we interact with them. It's experience once again. If there's somebody that you want to become a friend with, what do? You show yourself friendly. If there's somebody that you love and you want those bonds of love to remain secure and even deepen, what do? You do things for them. You talk to them in good ways. You give them gifts, whatever it might be. It's the same with God. That communion has to be real. It has to be concrete. It has to be existential. Because the world is such that we have to take that ground. We really have to. This is what we see in the gospel. We see in the gospel there's a young boy who's afflicted, the disciples afflicted by a demon. 20 years ago, we would go, maybe, maybe not. These days, when the world is getting darker, it doesn't seem so outlandish anymore, does it? It doesn't. There's a lot of trouble with spiritual darkness in the world today. And suddenly, we hear these stories in the gospel, and they become more believable, don't they? They kind of come into a higher and sharper relief. And that's because in order to defeat the darkness, and in order to be apprehended of the light, to come into the light, sometimes spiritual warfare has to take place. And the disciples were not able to cast this demon out. And they went to Jesus and said, why weren't we able to cast him out? And Jesus got a little frustrated with them. Oh, you perverse generation. How far you are lost. How long must I bear this? I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he said. How long must I bear this? Don't you understand? Don't you see the way reality really is? And the truth is they didn't. So he tells them, he says, this kind, of course he was able to expel the demon by his word, but he said to the disciples, this kind only comes out by prayer and fasting. In other words, discipline must be applied in order for the evil to be pushed back, and in order for this boy who was healed to experience life as God intended it to be lived. It doesn't happen without Christ, and it's as true as it was true then. It is just as true today. So this experiential dimension then requires a particular discipline. We have to apply ourselves to being Christian. We have to pray, we have to fast, we have to do all these things if indeed we take our Christian life seriously. In other words, it has to move from idea to action. And the church, in its wisdom, and many centuries of wisdom, can teach us how to do that so that we can experience the power in our lives, that the same kind of power that Jesus demonstrated he had, that his disciples asked him about. That's what the Apostle Paul talks about in the epistle reading today. He says, I die so you might live. I'm the fool, but you are wise. What does he mean by that? He's saying that is because he's an apostle. He's last among all men. Now this sounds to us like a paradox because we say what? We're one holy, Catholic, and apostolic church, right? What that means is that we're a church that's built on the teaching of the apostles. Because the apostles, the ones sent forth by God, the apostolos, they receive their word directly from God. We receive our word from them. So their teachings are primary in the church. That's why we're one holy Catholic and apostolic church. So in our viewpoint, they're first, they're primary. Yet the apostle himself, the apostle Paul says, we're not first, we're last. So what's he mean? Is this a contradiction? No, no. What it means is that they give up their life for us in order to grow closer to Christ, to comprehend his wisdom, his power in our life. What happens is we have to put our life aside in a way. We have to die to ourselves, so that Christ can be born in us. The apostles did that more than anyone. And they had to, in order to come into communion, real concrete experiential communion with Christ for the sake of the church, because they became its teachers. It's not like all of a sudden one day they had this wisdom and they started speaking. No, this wisdom came out of their own suffering and out of their own sacrifice. And that's why he bore his sufferings willingly. We read in Corinthians, you know, he was beaten, he was shipwrecked, he was the offscouring of the earth, which means that he was no one in the eyes of men, absolutely no one in the eyes of men. A suffering he took on willingly because of his love for the church and those in it. And because of that suffering, that he was because of his faith, he endured the suffering. But it's also through the suffering that great wisdom was given to him for our behalf. And I say us, because his teachings are still relevant today and given to us in Holy Scripture. But it's that kind of sacrifice that enabled the church to be built. So here was a man of faith, but his faith was not only tested by his suffering, was also strengthened by his suffering, so that he too then was able to do what Jesus did and what the disciples could not at first. So when we speak then of the Christian life, again, we're not just speaking about being members of a club or being committed to a very comprehensive and sound moral theology, you know, a good way of living. It is a good way of living. And that's a whole lot better than having no morality at all. But we're called into something deeper. And that deeper is that concrete, real communion with Christ, who is being born in us and seeks to draw us closer to him. So through the prayers of our Holy Fathers, may the Lord have mercy upon us and save us. Amen. Please rise. Help us, save us, have mercy upon us.